Today, we're talking all about small business, marriage, and divorce, but not yours, your partner's. Stay tuned. I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses while controlling risk. So if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win. Hey everyone, I was listening to a podcast where they were interviewing some wealthy people who sometimes make investments in small business and sometimes have actually provided capital to people that wanted to buy a small business, right? And one of the comments that one of these investors made during the interview kind of made me think, and it kind of stewed in the back of my head for a while and gave me the idea for today's video. In that interview, the investor said that because of the nature of small businesses and how integral the ownership can be to the operations day to day of the small business, and because of the devastating impact that a divorce can have on a person who is owning and running a small business, that before they make an investment in a business or provide capital to an entrepreneur that wants to buy a business, he said part of their investigation was on the spouse. So, in the majority of situations, it's a man who's involved in the business, and maybe they're married to a woman, and so even though the wife has got nothing to do with the business, and her name may not appear anywhere on anything to do with this business deal, they will investigate her. And they will want to know her background. They'll want to know about her family. They'll want to know about her career, what she does, et cetera, because they're trying to determine if there's anything worth worrying about with respect to the future endeavor that they're getting involved with her husband. Okay, and so it's great because when I was thinking about that, I began to think about all the different people that I have dealt with over the course of my career who have been involved in a divorce, and how that obviously has a huge impact if you're a business owner and you go through a divorce. But the people that I've dealt with who were not going through a divorce, but their business was thrown in turmoil because their partner, or and I'll use the term broadly to also mean other important shareholder that works in the business, right? So their partner was involved in a divorce, and it ended up dragging them through a whole pile of nonsense. So I did some poking around. I found this article online that I'm going to use to open this up today, and this is from 2011, so it's dated, okay. But we're not going to get into any details here in the article. I just want to sort of highlight. This is from a law firm in Ontario, Canada, and it says, if you own all or most of the shares in a corporation, you should be aware of the rights that your spouse may have in that business in the event of divorce or separation. Division of property. It says the Ontario Family Law Act provides for an equalization scheme for the division of property when married spouses divorce or when they separate with no reasonable prospect of resuming cohabitation. Under this scheme, each spouse's net family property, and it gives a calculation there, they're entitled to half of the difference between them. So you kind of have to equalize out what each person is going to take away from the marriage. And it says ownership interests in a corporation generally form part of a spouse's net family property. A court can order one spouse to transfer shares in the corporation or have the corporation issue new shares to the recipient spouse if that is the only reasonable way to satisfy the equalization or support obligations. So you can see here, like, the lawyer is basically saying, the court can compel you to, like, issue new shares, or all this kind of stuff. Like, the court can compel changes in the business because somebody who is an owner is going through a divorce. It goes, the article further goes, there are obvious problems with transferring shares and thus creating a business relationship between spouses who are involved in a matrimonial dispute. and with existing business partners. So this is what the highlight of today's video, right? The spouse who owns the business may also want to have some control over who buys shares from the recipient spouse so as to avoid being stuck with an undesirable business partner, right? So and then it goes on, and there was another very interesting part down here about fraudulent use of a corporation. So I want to read this to you as well. It says, if your non business assets are insufficient to pay your spouse's claim for support, and the court is convinced that you're using a corporation as a facade to avoid equalization of support payments, the corporation's asset may be used to calculate and secure your spouse's claim. This is generally referred to as piercing the corporate veil. And it says the court doesn't like to do this, but in exceptional cases, they may ignore the corporate form when they believe that assets are being hidden. So let me tell you a few stories, right? So as I've mentioned before on here several times, I'm also certified as a machinery and equipment appraiser, and I have been asked in the case of matrimonial dispute to go and appraise a business's assets. And because the court was considering the value of those assets in the division of property between these two people, right? So I've seen it firsthand. Some other cases that I've come across. There was, and this is not a firsthand story to me. This story was told to me, but it was talking about a partnership arrangement. I believe it was a corporation. There were 5 dentists. They had an office together and they shared some of their support staff and all that kind of stuff. And one of them was going through a divorce, and the lawyer representing their spouse was able to convince the court that they were somehow hiding money within the structure of the corporation. And so the court ordered a forensic audit of the corporation. And in the execution of that forensic audit, um, all 5 of the dentists were compelled to submit all kinds of financial records, credit card statements, etc., just on and on and on and on. So it wasn't just the partner who was getting divorced who was kind of drawn into all of the drama and the pain and suffering involved in just having this examination go on. All of their partners were too. Um, in my own direct experience, I worked with a couple of people who were business partners in a manufacturing business, and one of them went through a divorce. And after many, many meetings between lawyers and accountants and the partner, what ultimately was decided was that the partner who was getting divorced would divide their shares with their spouse, and then the corporation would redeem those shares. So they had enough cash in the corporation to do this. And so basically, if you think about 2 partners each having 50 shares, one partner had to give 25 shares to their spouse, and then the corporation bought those shares back from her. And so what was the net impact? Well, the ratio of ownership changed between the 2 partners, but the partner who was not part of the divorce, they, in this particular situation, ended up owning more of the corporation overall, but they ended up owning more of a corporation which just had all of its liquidity drained out, right? And so that opened up a whole new ball of wax with respect to their operations. They had to go and they had to secure bank lines, they had to borrow money, they had to then go around and raise cash and go through all of these problems, and then incur all of the expense related to interest on those loans, etc. They were basically in a really solid position on their balance sheet. Things had been going well for a long time. And the divorce then kind of was a huge setback to the company. And so there was another quote that I read, and I went looking for it today, and unfortunately I couldn't find it. It was a gentleman talking about, and it was someone I think from the search fund space. They were talking about marriage, and they were talking about how spouses have this. I guess it's a call option at any moment to call half the equity of their partner's ownership in a corporation, um, in the event of any kind of breakdown, right? Because corporations are often part of marital property. Now, the article that I just read from is from Ontario in Canada. And where you live is going to have a huge impact on what the rules may or may not be if you are in a partnership with somebody who potentially could get a divorce, right? You could get a divorce, you could be in partnership with someone who could go through a divorce, and where you're standing is going to have an impact on that. and where somebody moves is going to have an impact on that. So one of the I think it's kind of crazy. One of the craziest things about marriage is that it is a contract which changes depending on where you're standing. Okay. So you can marry someone in one jurisdiction, and most places around the world, most governments around the world are going to recognize that marriage, right? So you get married in, Maine, right? And then you move together to California. And if you get divorced in California, it's California's rules that are going to apply to how you split up, not the rules that you got married under in Maine. Okay. And so you could be in a jurisdiction where your business is operating, and you might think that the rules of that jurisdiction are pretty solid or fair or reasonable with respect to what could happen if there's a marriage breakdown. But if your business grows over the course of time and it requires you to open an office in another place, and you decide that one partner is going to move to that other place with their spouse, well, all of a sudden there could be these new things that your business is exposed to that it wasn't exposed to before, just because of where your partner now lives, right? So the theme of today's video is simply that you need to take a risk mitigation approach, not only in your own marriage, if you're going to be in business, but in the marriages of the other people that you might be doing business with. And so basically, if you're going to get into business, you're in one of two categories. You're either a married person or you're not, right? And by married person, that definition could also expand based on where you happen to be standing. Because if you are in a place where just living with someone of the opposite sex in a relationship in the same house kind of puts you into the category of married, then your partner could be married without actually ever having had a wedding ceremony, right? So you're either married or you're not, and where you're standing is also going to have an influence on that, whether you're married, right? So if you get into business with someone who is not married, a truly single person who lives on their own, right? And they might have a girlfriend, or get an opinion from a qualified lawyer in your jurisdiction. Is this person married or not? If they're not married, then you have to be prepared for the eventuality that they could become married, right? And again, if they get married, then all of a sudden their ownership stake in the business could then become part of marital property, again, depending on where you are, right? So my advice is that, and I made many videos about this before. In fact, I just created a playlist for partnership issue videos. This video will become a part of that, but all the other partnership issue videos I've made before, and there have been 5 or 6 of them specifically about partnerships. I always recommend a partnership agreement or a shareholder agreement, depending on how you're organized. And that might be called an operating agreement, in the States with an LLC, for example. You need to have some kind of contract with the other people that you own and operate the business with that details who does what and what happens if we should, get into a dispute, and is there a shotgun clause and all that kind of stuff. So what you may want to get legal advice on is, does it make sense in a partnership agreement between people that are not married to actually put in a partnership agreement that a prenuptial agreement or marriage contract or cohabitational agreement is required by your business partnership for the partners, right? I mean, uh, there are plenty of people out there who will say, oh, it's, hey, that's not very romantic, asking your partner, if she's going to move in with you to get her to sign a cohab agreement or a prenup if you're going to get married. Um, and so this is why some people don't broach that conversation. They don't do it. So this is the great, sort of third party negotiating aspect to this is, is you can just remove the freedom, right? You can just say to someone, if you're going to get into a business partnership with me, then I understand that your future wedding could have an impact on my business affairs. And therefore, if we're going to be in partnership together, it is a requirement of this partnership that you get a marriage contract or a prenup or whatever, right? So that is laying the groundwork for protecting your future interests in business. Again, you got to talk to an attorney, got to talk to a lawyer. You got to find out if you can reasonably do this, what it would look like. And it could very well depend on where you're standing if you can or can't reasonably do something like this. If you are already married, or if the person you're getting into business is already married, then you have to recognize the fact that you are not getting into a partnership with just your partner. You are also getting into a partnership with that other person, right? And so it may make sense to not have a partnership agreement just with your partner, but to require that the spouses are also included in some format into these agreements or even share ownership structure, right? If a court could deem that the spouse is owns half the shares anyway, then maybe you should just start off by putting half that person's share allotment into their spouse's name anyway. And then, there could be an agreement between those two that if there is a breakdown of the marriage, how they're going to deal with the exit of that spouse. And that agreement could involve all of the partners. So, there can be contingencies planned out for with how we might deal with that in the eventuality that this could occur. Is it alarmist? Is it, you know, is it, you know, a bad idea? Well, I mean, look at the rate of failure that marriages have. It's quite a high rate. And we don't know what the future holds, right? We don't know what can happen down the line. We, we don't know how people change over the course of time. Um, is recognizing a risk to your business and taking steps to reasonably deal with that risk before it ever happens when it can be dealt with in an expedient and economical fashion. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's just basic business risk management, right? And if all it's going to take is some investment with some lawyers and some paperwork and contracts, a lot of which could already be sitting in boilerplate format on the hard drive of your attorney, right? The topic has to be brought up and the conversations have to be had, even though they may be tough conversations. Um, this is, to me, it's kind of one of these litmus tests of who are you doing business with, right? Because if you're going to do business with someone else and you're going to be contributing capital, time, effort, labor, and they will be as well, and they refuse to talk about the idea that perhaps their marriage might break down at some point in the future, well, it's kind of an indicator to me that you're dealing with someone who maybe lacks a certain amount of emotional maturity, right? Or business acumen. And that, in a way, can be a red flag that perhaps you don't want to be a business partner with this person, right? So, food for thought, food for thought. And anyway, I'd love to hear your stories. If you've been impacted by a business partner whose marriage broke down, tell your story down below if you want to. Give us some comments. And if you think that what I've said is absolute nonsense, I'd love to hear from you too. Put the comments down below. And with that, we'll see you later. And check out the partnership playlist if you're ever contemplating getting into business with somebody else. If you just go to my YouTube channel and look for the playlists, all of those videos are grouped together and they span the years. I think there were 6 of them when I created the playlist, and this one will become a part of it too. Anyway, maybe we can put a link to it. I don't know. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.